maybe that's a good time to kick things off. As I said, pleasure to be joined today by Justin, Amit, and Brian, and I'll give them all a minute to introduce themselves in a second. I guess, to introduce myself, my name's Jack Thiel. I'm the APAC commercial lead at Mayday, and very fortunate to be trusted as the host for all of these webinars. I enjoy it. I enjoy having these conversations. I'm an accountant by trade. I started my career at PwC, spent some time in local, I suppose, small business accounting firm, very much at the height of Xero's growth. I really loved the tech side of the industry and wanted to stay involved in the profession. So for the last 6 years or so, I've been in and around it, working in a couple of different roles for accounting tech startups. So really kind of thrilled to be in this position and being able to have this conversation, connecting the dots between in-house finance teams, software, and everything in between. At Mayday, we're for larger Xero users. The majority of our customers have in-house finance teams, and our mission is to automate the month-end process. We're starting with the needs of those who are multi-entity, so very relevant for our Xero for Group series. So we're talking about recharges, cross-entity bank recs, keeping intercompany loans in balance, that kind of thing. We have over 225-star reviews on the Xero App Store. We won Emerging App of the Year last year, and very thrilled about the opportunity to be supporting this customer base. Interestingly, though, it does feel like this side of the market hasn't received as much attention in terms of education and content as maybe as it should. And so, listening to a lot of our own customers, there's many who are still asking the question, is Xero still the right system for me as a business? Can I scale with it? If yes, how long for? How far can I grow? Is it indefinite, or is there going to be a point at which I outgrow it? What's very clear is the underutilization of the Xero ecosystem among larger businesses on Xero. So I think there is certainly a lot more people can be extracting from the system, and a lot further they can be going with Xero before having to go down that, I suppose, expensive and time-consuming and difficult ERP implementation journey. In our webinar just yesterday, Ernest, who's one of the financial controllers who was on the conversation, said that he was quoted 160K to 200K for the initial implementation of an ERP, and that's before the $5,000 per user annual fees, and that's before 58% of ERP implementations fail. So don't get us wrong, there's a time and a place for these things, but I think what we're trying to get across in the series and in a lot of the content that we produce is that you can go further with Xero than you might realize, and the outcome going to an ERP isn't necessarily better. So hopefully, we can kind of add some value on that conversation for you today. We don't want to overcorrect and replace one myth with another, but we certainly want to kind of bust the myth that Xero isn't for medium to large businesses. So with that all being said, I want to launch a quick poll, just to a couple of quick polls actually, just to see who we've got on the call today. So first question's up on screen. Do you currently use Xero? I think so far the vast majority of people who have been joining these sessions are on Xero. It looks like everybody here is on Xero, so that's great to see. Thank you for your quick responses there. I'll chuck up another one now as well, just to understand kind of the size of groups that we're dealing with. So that one's going up now as well, just because obviously the conversation can differ if you're a 2-entity group or a 50-entity group. Great, okay, cool. We've got a good variety, someone over 51, someone between 30 and 50, a few 2 to 5 entity groups. Pleasure, awesome. Okay, great. Thank you for your quick responses there as well. So now, before handing over to Justin, Amit, and Brian for their introductions, one final thing is that this entire series is framed against the backdrop of how can we be useful to our target customer, and that really channels through everything that we're trying to do at Mayday and CFO Tech Stack. It's the reason I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt. I did yesterday because it was the Mayday session, but I won't be today. I won't be for any of the other sessions. It's not product marketing. It's about how to build a best-in-class app stack. It's about how can we go further on Xero. It's about calling out the pain points, the problems, the challenges, the opportunities, and hearing from in-house finance leaders who have been here before, who have done it themselves and achieved success. So hopefully we can share some of those experiences with you today. And so, yeah, I guess without further ado, I'd love to have the panel introduce themselves. Justin, I might go to you first if I can.
Hi, thanks, Jack. So I'm Justin Campbell, solution engineer at ApprovalMax. So, just a brief introduction. Like ApprovalMax is really a finance team's best friend because we really help you scale up Xero and automate your approvals and do things like implement segregation of duties and approval for new supplies that get added to your Xero system. And we also help you keep unnecessary people out of your Xero file because people can do things like raise a bill of purchase order in Xero. So yeah, that so I really came across. I used to work for Xero. I came across to Approval Max because I really had I saw in my time in Xero that some of these larger businesses, especially non-for-profits, had were having these problems. So I was pretty excited to work at a company where I could help finance teams scale up Xero.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Amit.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. I'm Amit Shah. I'm a director at the Gild Group, and I have an accounting background, and I spent about 10 years working with startups and scale-up businesses, from a CFO advisory, structuring, expansion into the US sort of perspective. I ran it for a business called the Startup Shop, and about 4 years ago, joined up with Gild. We've gone on a similar expansion journey. We sort of scaled from 35 to 175 people over the last 4 years across 7 or 8 entities ourselves. And so I think about working with clients and helping them expand and put systems in place, and now practicing what we preach and doing it internally. And ApprovalMax is one of the things that we use. So happy to chat about it today.
Awesome. That's cool. I didn't realize the size and scope there of the business. Congrats on all of that. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Chad. So my name is Brian. I'm the management accountant, United for Care. So we mainly work in the disability sector. And I've only joined this company for like half a year or since Jan. And we've been basically using ApprovalMax since launch. And then when I first joined, and I noticed a lot of like accounting, finance errors, that's why I reached out to Mayday, and we got our relationship started sometime this year. And then yeah, I've been using these two softwares for ever since I got here, and it's been great. But
Cool.
thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Well, great. It's great to have you all here. I guess to kick off the conversation, I might go to you first and kind of I'd like to start with the pain points, I suppose, around this topic. So we're talking AP financial controls. Do you remember? I know Brian just mentioned he joined and ApprovalMax is already in place. Were you and the Guild Group, were you there seeing the processes before it was implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we grew in a quick period of time. So we were very manual as a start, and something that absolutely worked. And I think most small businesses, finance teams, sending emails around to the right people. Is this okay to pay? 1 or 2 people, sort of less segregation of duties, I guess, in terms of approvals, banking, all of that. And so now our finance team and our business has matured to the point where the sheer volume of bills that need to be paid has become an issue. The number of different approvers, the number of different people who are controlling their budgets. So the idea of emails, and that's still number one for me, just getting things out of your inbox because they get lost, and being able to systemize that, then being able to get the right people to approve in a single place and have a history of that, both a little bit from a risk perspective. I shouldn't say that. I know it is important, but in our business, just in terms of has the right person looked at the right invoice, and when it gets to the banking part, or the finance, we can have a level of comfort knowing that a few things have been checked along the way.
So you're kind of saying that it's a little bit of a risk perspective, but also just an efficiency perspective, and what do you see as the primary trigger point, maybe?
So for us, on both of those, it's efficiency for sure. It's sort of the volume of transactions coming across, being able to be approved in a single place, having people not have to sort of sporadically through the day do approvals, but being able to sort of choose a time, go in, get it all done, add queries, add comments, and have that centralized. And then we have team specifically in different places around Australia. We also have team in Manila and India, and just people in different time zones being able to better collaborate without having to wait for overnight and things like that has been super helpful.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, Brian, you've entered a business that had it already in place, but I don't know if you can speak from prior experience or kind of how you find the process, to be more streamlined, or is what Amit's saying resonating? Have you been there before where it's all email based? What's life like now with something like ApprovalMax in place?
Yeah, well, I came from other industry as well, and across a lot of the other industry, they were using a similar process what Amit was saying. And when I got here, and they were using ApprovalMax for some of our entities, not all of our entities. Some of them have to even roll them onto ApprovalMax to like get rid of the same problem that Amit was facing. So ApprovalMax definitely has been like a really good help to just keep a centralized location. Instead of having me to send out 10,000 emails, I don't know, throughout a month, I can just do in a one click of a button, and then it's all done. So that's been very helpful to like improve the team efficiencies and stuff like that.
I mean, how does that work? So to someone who's listening in now who hasn't seen ApprovalMax or hasn't used it or any other tools in this space, how do you deal with 10,000 emails in one click? What do you practically mean by that?
Yeah, so instead of me previously, let's say once an invoice gets generated and get pushed into Xero, instead of me download the invoice, put that into attachment, send it into the individual approvers for their approvals, also including like the details that you need to, like a short table to summarize all the invoices. Instead of me doing all of that, ApprovalMax is able to capture all the relevant information. Once I submit those invoices to ApprovalMax just capture all of that, send it to the relevant approvers, and then they have it on their phone, on their tablets, or anything that they're using, and then they can just view it at any time that they want with all the information as well, instead of me trying to summarize, put that into attachment, and then send the individual email.
Amit, did you have something to add to that? So you come off.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for both our business and some of our clients, it's kind of helped us define what the true source of or the source of truth is in terms of payables. So you sort of have bills floating around emails, or even traditionally on someone's desk as paper. You have ideas of things being entered into Xero, and at least for our practice, all of our clients are Xero clients, even the ones that are scaled like sort of 50 mil revenue and plus. And I think about specifically ones who have people overseas. Is it what's been entered into Xero? Is it what's entered as drafts? Is it what's due for payment? I think about a finance team doing batch payment runs and sort of sending it out to all the key people. Which ones, please mark which ones should be paid. And they always often come back with, hey, I thought this one's already been done, or we're disputing this. So it allows for a level of correspondence that usually happens often at the time things are about to get paid, which is always like a bit of a stressful time, to happen all prior to that, even like over the course of the week, and then define sort of what's due to be paid as a really pure, this is what needs to go out. Then from my side, it helps with cash flow planning, because we can kind of start getting a better idea of what's going to go out each week.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, Justin, from your perspective, you obviously you talk to customers all the time. Based on what Amit and Brian have kind of called out already, is there anything else that you see as reasons why people are coming to yourself or others in the team and saying, hey, we've got a problem here?
Yeah, I mean, but both Amit and Brian have done a really good job of explaining the general problem that we solve. But the people who come to us, they're often using those paper-based or email-based systems, and they're just not working. Like I put myself in their shoes, and imagine if like a few weeks later after something's been approved. So you want to know the context of why that was approved and the whole conversation around it. If you're using email and paper-based systems, good luck knowing the whole history of that transaction. Whereas in ApprovalMax, like Amit said, that whole conversation gets recorded there, and we've proved that a lot in the last 12 months because you can now even mention people, use the @ symbol to mention people, and you can add people as watchers to it, that means that they can comment on a bill, and so you can capture that entire conversation and context around why that's been approved. And we've now even updated it so if you wanted to, we can now push those comments into Xero. So if you're looking at the transaction in Xero, it'll also be down the bottom in the history. So it's in some ways ApprovalMax is a not just an approval tool, but also a communication tool that specifically relates to the approval process.
And are there any other tools that come into the Xero ApprovalMax workflow that you see regularly, Justin? Like I know from our side at Mayday, Ryan, we work with you. I don't know if you have a workflow that combines the two, but I know that there are, internal recharges that people are running through Mayday, and then that posts to Xero, and then that's getting picked up through ApprovalMax for review and approval. Are there other tools out there that you see often as like, look, if you've got Xero and ApprovalMax, X or Y or Z is often something to consider in the tech stack as well?
Yeah. So most common one, of course, are the bill and receipt capturing tools. So we have a direct integration with Dext, for example, but we've also released our own tool, ApprovalMax Capture, as well.
Cool.
In that, the other thing that comes up a lot is your budgeting and reporting tools. So we have a feature called where we can work with the budgets that are in Xero, and so when you're approving bills and purchase orders, you can actually see how much of your budget you've spent for that account code when you're approving things, and if you're using one of the reporting tools that can help you prepare a budget and then push that into Xero, then that can be there's a really good combination between using us to control costs and then using the reporting tools to tell you what you've spent after it's happened. So so we fit in really well with a lot of the other tools that scale up Xero.
I'll ask Amit and Brian as well to share if they've got any others that they're kind of using in their tech stacks more broadly. But just quickly, Justin, Q&A. Josh Hawkey asked a question, I think, to follow on from what you mentioned earlier. He basically said, how can we push these comments into Xero? So I don't know if that's something that you can cover right now or something that's best left for.
So it's a very new feature, so that's why you wouldn't have seen it before. So what you've got to do is go into your bill and purchase order workflow area, and I think also for most of the other types of transactions we approve as well, click on the little gear icon, and now in the settings area, you'll see that there's different options that you can choose what you want to get pushed through to Xero. So it gives you a few different options there, how much of that context you want to go into Xero.
Cool, great. Well, tip for anyone out there who's already using ApprovalMax. Amit, I might go to you first. So continuing on from the conversation Justin and I started around other, I suppose, useful tools that people can consider using in this Xero and ApprovalMax workflow. Is there anything else that you feel sits side by side?
Yeah, maybe not exactly the same, but as an overlap, we sort of see ApprovalMax as deferred payment for bills and for AP, and we use it kind of hand in hand with the way we do expenses. So we, as a business, use AirWallex. I know, I actually forget the change of name, but I know there's others out there that do similar expense cards, and I'm not affiliated with any of them. But the idea of capturing point of sale receipts, being able to assign budgets through some of these cards, and then being able to align budgets. So we know, as an example, that we might get bills for particular contractors, and they're budgeted in a certain way, whereas we know that things like entertainment and staff amenities are almost all on staff cards and debit cards. and they get budgeted and they get to get monitored directly out of, in our case, Airwallex, or in some of our clients. They use their own systems, and so being able to split out your overall budgeting, and again, it may not now be like a MD who's managing the whole budget. It might be sort of a manager who's really just in charge of a $500 a month entertainment budget for their team or something along those lines. And so we find that those two systems work really well together.
Cool. Brian, anything that you would add to that?
No, just similar to Amit, will you also use something similar to keep track of expenses and ApprovalMax? And that's how we track like all the AP side of things.
Yeah, okay, cool. I mean, guys, the Q&A is open. Feel free to chuck any questions in there, because I think we've actually had quite an efficient conversation. I feel like we've covered off really clearly kind of what some of the key pain points and problems are with the Xero workflow, as kind of, you know, and what's okay. I mean, maybe that's a fair point to kind of discuss, is at what point is this, you know, still okay maybe to manage outside of a, you know, I think everyone starts off with a bit of an ad hoc workflow on these things, and then eventually figures out, you know, at least from my experience, you kind of have to do stuff non-automated to figure out what your workflow is, to figure out what your process is, and then you can go down the automation path and actually go and automate a process that you have. Or do you feel like, no, actually this is just something that you don't need, you know, there's no reason why not, you know, it scales up from 2 people in a team to 150 people in a team, there's no reason to wait? Or I'd just be curious to get your thoughts. Amit, maybe you first.
So when I think about clients coming to us, asking about a generic solution, or asking about automating this particular area, or on the odd occasion when we've kind of been really insistent, hey, you need to do something here, there's often a tipping point, especially with our clients, between founder-led businesses and then an executive team. So one person having all of the knowledge, usually all of the authority, and then passing that down. So they all of a sudden go from not having full transparency into his or her business, and they also don't have the time or the inclination to be across all of the things that are happening, but they still want a level of rigor, or they want usually a level of rigor because there wasn't one before, because it was all in their head. And so I think about the level of expansion before you put something in place that goes into a system off the back of Xero. And that's, I mean, we were talking about AP, but it's the same for budgeting, it's the same for reporting, it's the same for expenses. All of these things go from emails and Excel sheets into usually a solution at the time where someone's like, we can't be spending like 6 days on month end, or we can't be doing it in this way. We have to put some efficiencies. We've probably yet to see the other side. Like we've definitely had clients go down the ERP route, but as I said, we have businesses doing sort of 50 million across the world, and they sort of use a series of Xero files. So there is a volume based limit, and that's not even a hard limit, because I think there's ways around that in Xero, in terms of batching transactions and sort of maybe not needing to have every single one of your sort of million e-commerce transaction fees, for example, in Xero. You can work around that, but there's like a level or a level of detail or reporting that sort of suggests that. And often businesses that we've worked with, it's because they've had pretty intricate levels of inventory or something like that before they get to that point, using multiple Xero files often with these kinds of add-ons has, I was going to say band-aided, but it's been a really scalable solution from sort of 5 or 6 people in the business in one location to numerous locations in numerous countries, and that's been a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, that it keeps coming up, conversation after conversation, that there are these few points where it's a hard stop on Xero. Basically, there's a couple of things, or you know, a handful of things maybe, that are like, it's time to go, but it's not purely based on size or the age of your business or the volume of your transactions. It's often to do with that. Are we a complex, you know, inventory-based, manufacturing-based business where we need, you know, this entire flow from raw materials through to goods out the door that need to be managed under an ERP? Or there's, you know, some really complex multi-currency scenarios with multi-currency reporting needs. But even then, sometimes you can find a solution with one of the apps in the App Store. But unless you have to go, it seems like the preference is to stay, because when you hire someone, they can pick up Xero and use it easily. The experience is a lot nicer just from a UX perspective. You know, when it comes to something like bank feeds, you're not having to invest 20 grand to get them set up. It's just there. But I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else, you know, maybe with respect to the conversation today, this workflow around managing AP, financial controls, segregation of duties, is there a limiting factor here where at some point you're going to have such complexity, too many departments, or I don't know, that maybe you might need to outgrow Xero, or you may outgrow Xero?
If it's to me, I don't think so. Like, I think it is genuinely sheer volume. But just in terms of bills, and again, whether it's construction or manufacturing, if things like purchase orders go beyond purchase orders for a single line item, but purchase orders for projects, I've seen that get to the point where, again, it's not even ERP, but people manage it through Google Sheets, and they have to manage budgets and reporting in a particular way. And I would imagine that there would be some ERPs that do that probably quite well. But the clients I'm talking about weren't sophisticated or at the level where it would make commercial sense for them to have made the leap anyway. And yeah, maybe just as a follow-on to Xero, I would say in terms of the ecosystem about outgrowing it, most of the clients that we find are multi-entity and use apps like this probably use apps like Employment Hero and things as well. So they sort of don't see necessarily a limitation in Xero, but they sort of say, well, we're more sophisticated in this particular area. And I think you sort of alluded to it before, Jack. The ecosystem's pretty broad in terms of what you can do by keeping your core accounting system, which is, at least in our perspective, really easy to use, really accessible, but then take key parts of it and use specialized apps for that.
And I mean, Justin, I'm sure you're on the other side of this, right? So does ApprovalMax work with ERPs?
Yes, we do. We have an integration with NetSuite. So, and I have had conversations with quite a lot of finance teams, and I do sometimes ask them, why are you leaving Xero? And I have to admit, like, I don't always get like a really compelling answer. Like, it's usually, oh, you know, visibility, blah blah blah, and then something around, you know, the inter-entity transactions, and you know, I kind of feel like, oh well, but you know, by this stage they've already kind of made the decision. But you know, maybe if they'd looked at a Mayday, they might have gone, oh gee, this makes it really easy to handle all these different Xero file. And then maybe if they'd talked to some of the reporting apps about getting some good consolidation reporting, then maybe they might not have felt the need to make that change. But it usually comes down to, you know, we just want to see everything in the one place. That's usually sort of why people, and I feel like there are good tools that can give you that visibility, and even ApprovalMax. Like, in the last 12 months, we released a public API for ApprovalMax. So if you want to feed your 17 ApprovalMax entities into a Power BI dashboard or something, you could do that, and that's probably going to be like a whole lot cheaper than you know, implementing an ERP. You know, so if you want to sort of get that high level visibility, we've built the tools to help you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to know as well that if you're on Xero now and you sign up to an app like ApprovalMax, that wherever you go in future, you know, you can that's still going to be a best practice workflow. And I think that's something to consider and take into account. Is we deal with not just you guys, but there's other apps out there as well who integrate with those ERPs. And so as a result, it's like, well, if you're going to be ending up back on these tools anyway, once you've invested all this money in an ERP, you're still going to be using a third-party forecasting software. You're still going to be using a third-party approval software that is, you know, is it really giving you that all-in-one outcome anyway? And so is it worth the investment? I mean,
Yeah.
Brian, from your perspective, where are you at on that journey? Is it something that you've looked at, worked with before, or are you pretty content with what you've got set up at the moment?
Oh, so far I think we're pretty good because we at the moment we are also thinking of like doubling our entity sizes. And instead of just flicking directly into like a large ERP, which will be a huge investments like you guys mentioned, we're just gonna stick with Xero and use all the relevant apps that we've been using. For example, like when I first joined, like all the intercompany stuff, all the between entity sorry, all the things between entities are all messed up, and it took me a long time to fix it all up. And then I found Mayday with like basically a click of a button at the end of the month, and then I can go get it all matched up. And now I can see where I'm missing details and where I need to make changes. So it's like apps like these with ApprovalMax, with Mayday, with we also use Wheel for expenses. Like the more you look into the App Store, into different areas that you're searching for, the more answers you're gonna find. And at the end of the day, it's still much cheaper options compared to a large enterprise that might not even solve 100% of your problem. It might only solve 60 of them. And the remaining 40, you still have to find some external parties and at what cost at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And I mean, guys, if there are any questions out there for Amit, Justin, or Brian around your own tech stack, apps that we're talking about, any other challenges that you've got, any specific questions, please feel free, make the most of the chat if you can, because otherwise I think we're probably at a relatively good kind of closing point. I know we've still got a little bit of time left up our sleeves, but if there aren't any questions, then no need to kind of hold you guys here for more than we need to. So, I mean, maybe as some final thoughts, takeaways, tips based on what this kind of conversation has pulled out. I mean, is there any kind of core message that you'd be keen to leave anyone who's listening in with? I mean, Amit, maybe I can start with you.
Yes, just that if I'm talking to a client about scaling, and I said as a starting point, our clients use Xero, so that's probably a given. But as they're scaling, what's taking the longest amount of time in terms of risk? What's keeping you up at night? Because it's very rarely throwing more bodies at the problem. I sort of don't believe in getting 100 apps for the sake of it, but there's often complexities that are pretty individual to businesses that these types of things. So ApprovalMax is something that we use and our clients use, but it's not for every business. Like if you have very few bills and all of your clients are on direct debits and stuff, that would be fine. You don't need to incorporate this just for the sake of it. But yeah, if we come across businesses and we talk about things like month end, and a common query that comes up is, well, how do we sort of get all of our recons in, and how do we work out where we are at budget? And those back and forth emails or conversations take 10 days. When you start thinking and really drilling into what your pain points are in your particular business, what takes the most time, or as I said, what keeps sort of the executive team or founding team up at night from a risk perspective, just zero in on those things, especially with group entities, especially where one person isn't across all of the operations of the business. And then there's people that can help you to work out sort of what tech stack you need. And I mean, that's the CFO tech stack, sort of the whole idea around it, but it's sort of not one size fits all. So find out and do a bit of research.
Yeah, no, great. Agreed. Justin, any final takeaway or key message?
Yes. I would say making the move from the small business software to ERP is a massive decision, and that people shouldn't do it just out of frustration. I would be looking at the tech stack you have and then taking advice about what apps are available that can help you. But also in the tech stack you currently have, most of the apps you have probably have customer success teams, and there's probably a whole lot of functionality in apps you're currently paying for that you're not you're not
Yeah.
getting the full benefit of. And you know, we could a lot of these apps could probably really help you improve your efficiency. And so just I would just like, there obviously is a time where you need to make that jump if you outgrow the small SMB space, but just make sure you're not doing it for the wrong reasons, and make an educated decision.
Yeah, great. Brian?
Yeah, to add on to Justin's point, the teams at Mayday, at ApprovalMax, basically all these apps, they are very helpful. At one point, you can just throw whatever question, frustration you have with your current process, ask the relevant team and see if there's something that their product can help you to solve the problem. I had the similar problem with one of our processes, and I just asked the question with Mayday and Jack, and he just basically give me a demo on how their software can help me solve the problem. And it's the same case at ApprovalMax. I can just ask the support team, Eon comes to my mind, and then yeah, they will just come back to me with the solution or proposal and see what you can do to tweak your processes, and then with the software that they have, and then your processes is done within like 5-10 minutes. So it's not being afraid, like don't be afraid to just ask the question even to external parties, and they might already have a solution for you.
Awesome. And I think, I mean, my kind of core message, which has come up a few times in these conversations, and it comes up a lot when talking to, you know, hopefully people who are listening in today, that, you know, if you're using Xero for a group of businesses and you've got one other app in your app stack, or maybe you've got two other apps in your app stack, I'm not saying for sure, but it probably means that there's other opportunities for some efficiencies out there, because it just, the people that I talk to who are pretty savvy with this stuff, they tend to have somewhere in the vicinity of 4 to 8 connected. And there's no sweet number, there's no perfect number. It all depends on your processes and your business and your group. You might have a really simple business that doesn't need anything complex, and, you know, just running Xero and one add-on does the job. But if you're out there with a complex business, or you're struggling and you've only got one app that's connected to Xero, it could well be that there's some really good opportunities out there, whether it's ApprovalMax, whether it's Mayday, whether it's something else. Just coming to these sessions is hopefully valuable to learn what's out there. But there's a whole bunch of other resources and people who know this space inside and out, who can talk to you about what you're dealing with and what you're trying to solve. And, you know, starting with the biggest pain points and then moving up from there is probably not a bad place to start. So yeah, I might just go to our final slide, and while I do that, I'm just going to launch a very quick poll, just in case there is anyone out there who would like to hear from Justin or the ApprovalMax team or myself regarding catching up from a product perspective. No stress whatsoever. But in terms of coming up next this week, so tomorrow we've got spend and FX management with Airwallex. We've got HR and payroll with Employment Hero on Thursday, and then we've got consolidated reporting with Join on Friday. So 3 more sessions. Hopefully you feel like these have been valuable, and it's a jam-packed week for us. So very much looking forward to kind of having those conversations. And Amit, Justin, Brian, thanks again for your time. Great chatting. Yeah, hope it's been enjoyable from your side as well.
Thanks for having us, Jack.
No worries.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, no worries. Leave you to it. Thanks everybody. Bye.